10 years ago, we were obsessing over mason jars, stainless steel straws, and trying to fit a year's worth of trash into a tiny glass container. 10 years ago, sustainability felt aesthetic, measurable, and maybe even a little obsessive, and I was all in. But if 2016 is coming back, I think we need to talk about what we got right and what we got completely wrong, and why the version of environmentalism that worked on Instagram back then doesn't look anything like the work that actually matters in 2026. Because the shift from what sustainability looked like in 2016 to what sustainability actually is in 2026 is who's pointing the finger and who the finger is pointing at. It's time to stop blaming ourselves and hold the real culprits accountable. I don't need to go on about how weird it feels that 2016 was an entire decade ago, but it is really interesting to realize that I have been on the internet for the past decade, and I can literally see how my personal perspective on environmentalism, sustainability, consumerism, etc. has changed over that decade because I started this YouTube channel in 2016. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Shelby.
Hey guys, it's Shelby, otherwise known as Shelbizleee here on YouTube.
I have a degree in environmental science, and in 2016, I decided to use that background to start talking to people about what sustainability means and how we can live our lives more in line with the values that we share, which to me on this channel means sustainability. So if you didn't already know that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Would love to have you stick around for me to teach you more about that kind of stuff. If you happen to not be on social medias, at least the ones where you scroll endlessly and are exposed to trends, you might not know that 2016 was recently trending. My partner literally did not know this because she is so offline. But essentially people have been sharing their photos from 2016, and that made me think about all the differences that I see in myself when I started talking about sustainability online in 2016 versus who I am now and the things that I talk about in 2026. And I just thought it would be fun to analyze the difference between those two, as well as hear your perspective about what sustainability meant to you back then, or if you were even aware of it, or if you were part of the zero waste movement in 2016, and if you're still involved at all in the sustainability movement online now, how differently you think things feel and how differently you feel about it. It's just an interesting conversation I want to have. So that's what we're gonna do. So to be an environmentalist online in 2016 meant to be zero waste, or at least that you were working towards zero waste. And at the time there was this pinnacle of what that looked like, and it was Lauren Singer's trash jar. If you've never seen this jar, bless you. What a lucky life you have lived. But if you wanted to talk about sustainability or any form really of environmentalism online in the 2010s, you were expected to be as close to zero waste as possible, and the ultimate goal of that was to fit all of your trash into a jar. My frustration with the trash jar is endless and I think a little bit obvious. I personally never really tried to keep all of my trash in a jar. It just wasn't realistic for my lifestyle, and even then it probably wasn't realistic for the lives of the people who were keeping those trash jars. My friend Catherine Kellogg has actually come out and said like she used a trash jar for a year as an experiment, and there were so many ethical problems with portraying the movement in that way because it really doesn't take into account overall environmental impact. It really leaves out just so much context, and I feel like that goes without saying. Like, that is such an unrealistic way to have moved through the world. Aside from trying to fit all of your trash in a jar, we also had DIYing everything. And if you scroll back on this YouTube channel, which I don't encourage you to do, just don't do it. It is a part of my journey. I haven't taken the videos down, but they're not things that I would ever endorse now. But I did at one point try to make my own makeup out of stuff from bulk bins. I had access to bulk bins back then where I could get things package free, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Like putting turmeric and burnt almonds on my face when I was trying to make my own makeup is like too far, Shelby. Stop. Basically, that's all I use for bronzer is cocoa powder.
Wow.
The landscape of products back then is what sticks out to me the most. What was accessible to you in 2016 to get if you cared about packaging, ingredients, sustainability was so limited when I think back to it. So people were DIYing everything, and I've never been a DIY person. I don't like the thought of things going bad and possibly impact, like for as far as makeup goes, if the mascara goes bad and I get an eye infection. I was hearing things about soap lining people's washers and then breaking them. I just was never a fan of also having to make my stuff and it not be ready when I needed it. I never liked DIYing, but I'm giving you the vision of what 2016 was like back then. And apart from the trash jar, DIYing everything, there were the flat lays, okay?
Stop. This was 2016. This was the vibe at the time, okay? You need to understand.
The aesthetics of the zero waste movement was like so important back then because people were primarily learning about how to do this from people talking about it online, right? It's not something that is like accessible to you that your neighbor might be doing and you can learn from anybody in your real community. You were really only learning about this through media. And the content had to look a certain way, okay? It was all about bamboo, glass, and steel. It was all about those aesthetic flat lays from the farmer's market, from the bulk bins. The movement, looking back at it now, felt very much about aesthetics. It had a very clear aesthetic. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but there were foods that I would literally not eat for those years that I was trying really hard to be zero waste because they came in packaging. Like berries. Didn't have strawberries for probably 2 years because of the packaging. I once took a can of Amy's chili camping with us because I was like, oh look, I don't need anything else to make my like meal while we're camping, and I just put the can in the fire, and then I learned after that a lot of cans are lined in plastic, so I probably consumed so much plastic with that chili that we made. And I think the biggest thing I remember about 2016 was how much perfectionism was there. I was in it, okay? I was creating content on the internet when all of this was happening. The expectations put onto people who wanted to talk about reducing their waste at all was palpable. I can't even describe to you how much I felt like if I shared that I didn't have access to certain things and all the perfectionist parts of it weren't possible for me, that I just wasn't allowed to talk about it. And within all of that perfectionism is who is pointing the finger and who we're pointing the finger at, which is what I was alluding to in the beginning. It was me pointing the finger at other people who weren't going out of their way to be zero waste. And likewise, the comments were pointing their fingers at me, someone else who wasn't perfect and should be doing more. It was so much, I guess what maybe we would call today infighting. Everyone who's commenting on this cares, right? It was, I obviously care. Like, I'm only doing this for one reason, and it's because I care and because I want what's better for the planet and its people. But if it wasn't perfect, then people were constantly pointing fingers at me because they also cared. Whereas now I'm just like, if you somehow think that I don't care and that I'm doing all of this because I don't even know what an ulterior motive would be for me to be doing what I'm doing right now, if I didn't care, then I just don't care.
It matters not what you've done, but what you do with what you've done for others.
And any environmentalist conversation pre-2020 was really devoid of the acknowledgement of privilege and access, all of those sort of things kind of baked into what now I think environmentalism is. So let's go from, right, what I have just built this image up for you in 2016, what sustainability looked like, when things started to transition to where I think we are now. Reflecting back on 2016 was so interesting for me because it was a pivotal year for so many things in my life, not only when it comes to like sustainability in my career, but absolutely when it came to my mental health, because I will never forget living in my garage apartment with the maroon carpet and realizing in real time that I had anxiety. It was the first time I was coming to terms with all these things that were exploding in my life, and the through line was that I had undiagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. I think what's interesting is the zero waste movement felt like something that I could control, that the actions and the waste that I was bringing into my house felt like something that I could control when so much of like my mental health at the time was out of my control before I started therapy. Like, you wouldn't believe how often I reference 2016 to my therapist. genuinely. Which is why I want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, which is Grow Therapy. The therapist I have been seeing for years moved out of the country last year, understandably, so I decided to give Grow Therapy a try to help me find a therapist that could align with my schedule. She moved to the Netherlands, and so our schedules just didn't work, so then I had to find someone who was available the times that I needed and who also was able to help guide me complete my work on my anxiety journey, as well as someone who was LGBTQ friendly, because obviously that's important to me. They make getting the help you need actually feel human and accessible, and you can make an appointment in as little as 2 days. And you can find therapists that work with your schedule, which means even nights or weekends. And the good news is there are no subscriptions, you just pay per session. And Grow works with over 100 insurance plans. Sessions average around $21 with insurance, with some people paying as little as $0 depending on their plan. And you can do sessions virtually or in person, and you can switch therapists if you decide that the person that you're seeing just isn't really a good fit. So if you've been looking to take that first step, you can scan the QR code or go to growtherapy.co/Shelbizleee to find the therapist that works for you. 2020 was undoubtedly the turning point for the zero waste movement for many reasons, one of which bulk bins were closed, refill stores were closed. Going in and like bringing more germs into a container, bringing your own container somewhere was like a huge no during 2020, obviously. And that obviously had a huge impact on the stores that were trying to do reuse, refill, bulk bins, those sort of things at the time, which I feel like they were growing consistently. At least the numbers show that they were when it comes to like search terms and those sort of things. And then in 2020, obviously, like that was the end of that. So that was one thing that really shifted my perspective. Like, it wasn't really an option to be the perfect zero waster anymore, but I obviously still cared about sustainability and wanted to find ways to live a more sustainable life. So I started exploring different avenues. Like, I started talking a lot more about local food because supporting local farmers at that time and small businesses in general was really important. And just a lot of other things that I started to care about more during that time that if you, again, scroll back on my channel, you can see. But then obviously mid-2020, we had the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think, again, brought intersectionality to the forefront of the conversation. It's interesting because in college, I worked for the Office of Sustainability at my university, and they always emphasized that sustainability always has to do with not just the environment, but equity when it comes to social and financial things. I always knew that, but it was really hard until mid-2020 to figure out how to communicate that in a way that made sense. And there are so many incredible creators that I have talked to, promoted over the years that do that work more than I do. So I think if I can point you anywhere, it's to Intersectional Environmentalist. They are like the people to turn to understand why intersectionalism with the environmental movement is really important. I think that completely shifted what an environmentalist online looked like, what communication about sustainability looked like. And I'm forever grateful that happened, for the Black Lives Matter movement, for all the creators that came out and helped educate us on how to communicate properly, for shifting the conversation, for just completely taking this perfectionist expectation away and stop making sustainability look like only one thing, to really bringing so much more into the conversation. Like, there's no discounting how much the Black Lives Matter movement, summer of 2020, changed the sustainability conversation for the better. But personally, for me, what made the biggest difference in the way that I talk about sustainability in 2016 versus 2026 was the Texas freeze in 2021. We had no power. I had no emergency preparedness. I didn't even know how to turn on my fireplace at the time. And because the whole power grid was down, we didn't even have signal for at least 4 days, sitting in our homes, freezing, snow outside, never having experienced anything like that before. I started to realize that resilience is maybe more important than progress right now. And I think from 2021 to 2026, actively building community and resilience for not just sustainability, but for our communities at large has been so much more worth my time than anything I ever did pre-2021. When that freeze happened, I realized how vulnerable our systems are and how individualistic we truly are. And it was the first time I had to rely on my neighbors. It was the first time we had to figure out who has what capabilities and skills and resources and work together to get us through the scariest thing maybe I've ever experienced. And it changed my entire perspective on what matters difference and how to advocate for change. From that moment on, I vowed that my activism, my advocacy, my whatever you want to call what I do online and in my real life would be more connected to intersectionality, to resilience, to community, to bigger scale solutions. Once the world opened back up, I moved back to Austin in 2022, and I think you can see a pretty clear shift in my content from then on. I talk about zero waste and sustainability, but it's an accent to what I actually care about. So to compare 2016 to 2026, it was all about the swaps, right? It was all about the zero waste swaps, and to an end, which was people would buy those things on Amazon. And I think that's one of the more successful parts of what 2016 was, is that it was so visible, it was so tangible, that the problem of plastic pollution was so right there in your eyes, and then the solution was also as simple as click a link and buy this thing. I think that's why zero waste worked so well, because the enemy was so clear, the solution was so clear, and it was quick, and it was easy, and it was tangible, and it was visible. And in 2026, sustainability to me means so much more than clicking a link and buying a thing. I would almost rather do anything than give my money to Amazon. There's a whole other conversation to have about how much of the market Amazon has taken over and how they have become impossible to avoid. I'm not even going to say nearly impossible. I think it is literally impossible in today's day and age. And I will say 2016 compared to 2026, the zero waste movement did one thing very well, and it's make sustainable swaps more accessible. Like I said, in 2016, people were DIYing everything because a refillable mascara didn't exist. But today, if you want to buy a mascara that is sustainable, well, you not only does it exist, you have options. That's coming up because I just ordered a couple refillable mascaras that I want to test out, so stay tuned for that. We wouldn't be here now having this conversation about what sustainability looks like when it comes to boycotting corporations or doing local community activism if we hadn't gone from there to here. In 2016, where you spent your time, energy, and money was on figuring out how to DIY your dish soap, was on figuring out where you could get XYZ thing package free and where you're paying more to get that thing package free. Whereas in 2026, my time, energy, and money is in my community, in my literal neighborhood. I spend my time and my energy on educating my neighbors about how to stay informed about what's going on in our neighborhood and in our city, about where AI data centers are being built and how to write your representatives to make a difference, when and where to show up. I spend my time and energy gathering that information and disseminating it to my neighbors so that we can stop AI data centers in Austin. We've been successful already within the last few weeks, actually. Whereas I would spend my excess, maybe disposable, you would say, income on buying something package free, I will spend my disposable income now on supporting a local agriculture business that is right here, regardless of if it comes in plastic or not. I feel that money going back into my community is worth more than driving 30 minutes to the grocery store that will let me get my rice package free. And I use that money, instead of just trying to be perfect in my little bubble, to give to companies who are doing the right thing, right? I support Thrive Market because they have a zero waste warehouse. That waste diversion is so much more than anything I could ever do in my own home. That to me is sustainability now. And the other biggest difference between 2016 and 2026 is what an environmentalist looks like, what our homes look like, what our bodies look like, what our skin color, our identities, all parts of our identities, what it looks like on social media is so much different now than it was in 2016. And that probably is the thing I'm the most grateful for, that there are so many different voices with so many different perspectives to give us so many different avenues to how to be better to the planet, right? Because my saying, do your best and advocate for the rest, is not because I expect everybody to do their best and be perfect in their homes. And I don't expect everybody to be an activist and an advocate in their communities all the time. I don't expect you to be completely zero waste, no more than I expect you to be at every city council meeting. Do your best and advocate for the rest is to say that all of those actions matter. And in order to see a sustainable future, we're going to need all of it, not one or the other. And the ways that you take action will have to do with what your availability is, what your capacity is, your financial abilities, your energy levels, your capabilities, your skill sets are so different. I talk about this in a video that I have. I'll link it up here because I got a question recently about if I could tell people how to actually build community or become an advocate. And the answer is not that straightforward, which is a big difference, right? In 2016, there was a problem and a solution. Plastic was the problem, buying reusables was the solution. The problem with the sustainability movement in 2026 is it is nowhere near as straightforward or as tangible, as visible. The things I do in Austin to advocate for sustainability on a larger scale is not gonna look the same as even it looks in Houston. The organizations are different, the actions that are happening are different, and you have to learn about what's happening where you live, and you have to figure out how to enact change where you live and what changes would actually make a difference in your city. And that video that I linked up there is where I talk through all the things I've done since I moved to hopefully get the wheels turning for you on what being an advocate looks like, right? Because if we could spend as much time as we did in 2016 on making our lives perfect, and we spend that amount of time on advocacy now, the world would be a different place. I want people to understand that actual change is not always sexy, it's not always easy, it's not always tangible or visible or fast. We should still invest in our communities, we should still invest in a sustainable future because it matters. I've gotten a lot of comments over the last year saying that my community stand encouraged someone to get involved in their community, or my activism encouraged them to look into an organization where they live, or me changing my front yard inspired them to change their yard, which led to more of their neighbors becoming part of a wildlife habitat. Those are the sort of things I hope to inspire now with my channel, and my overall goal on this channel is to get you to give up scrolling and shopping for community and creativity, which I think this video tells you how I got there and hopefully how we can keep going. So I look forward to the conversation in the comments. And remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.